Good afternoon and welcome to the Vermont Legislature's House Committee on Environment and Energy. This afternoon, we're going to continue taking testimony on H67, an act relating to household products containing hazardous substances. Our first witness is Nicholas George. Welcome, Mr. George.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Sheldon and committee members for allowing me to speak and provide comments on House Bill 67 regarding household hazardous waste. It's my first time here in the State House. It's actually my first time being in front of a committee of this nature, so I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Like I said, my name is Nicholas Georges. I am with the Household and Commercial Products Association. HCPA represents a wide range of products from disinfectants and sanitizers to air fresheners, cleaners and degreasers, floor maintenance products, products used in your daily lives, whether it's in commercial settings, consumers and households, things that we take for granted every single day and don't think about a whole lot. Before joining the association, I came from industry working as a chemist. I've held various positions in research and development and regulatory roles within different companies. So whether it's developing new products that you all probably have used at some point in time, or ensuring compliance with the applicable laws and regulations that go with it. I've done that for a variety of products, whether it's in the HI&I space, household, institutional, industrial products, whether it's cosmetics and personal care products. I've also done a few food type products such as pan sprays. HCPA and our members understand the costs are rising and the need to bolster local and state funding for household hazardous waste programs. We want to work with all of you, the legislative, executive leadership, and other stakeholders to fund an effective and efficient solution. Our concern is that this bill, while it provides a funding mechanism, is not the effective and efficient route to be here. This bill would create a far more complex and expensive program that is necessary to safely manage products that are already covered under your existing programs. There are nearly 40 different requirements under this collection plan in which a stewardship organization would be required to create and comply with a vast range of potential products. Further, the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources will have nearly a dozen new responsibilities under this bill. Existing stewardship organizations, whether it's for things such as paint, batteries, or electronics, are built around products where we know there's going to be something left over. You don't go and buy paints for your home and buy the exact amount. I mean, it'd be wonderful we could do that, but that's not practical. So you buy more than you need, so you don't have to go back and try to match the colors. So what do you do with that leftover paint? It's not something that's easily disposed of. Batteries cause a number of issues within our solid waste programs. Fires are on the rise, and I don't think it's any coincidence that we're seeing more batteries go into the system that are likely the cause of a number of those fires. Electronics, again, difficult to dispose of. There's something that has to be done. The products I'm here to talk about today are all designed to be used to completion, and once done, that container should then go into the recycling program. We're talking about PET containers. We're talking about HDPE containers. Number 1 and number 2 resins. We're not talking about your more obscure plastics that are known to be problems in the system. I also represent products that are in steel containers or aluminum containers. Again, things that are easily recyclable. The existing stewardship organizations, therefore products that EPR, extended producer responsibility, is clearly an effective solution for. We had to come up with new solutions to handle these wastes. Whereas the products we're talking about, have solutions already. So think of being here in Vermont, your automotive windshield washer fluid, something that's very critical right now. When do you ever dispose of that product before the container is empty? You don't. You put that HDPE container in the recycling bin when it's empty. Another example is something as simple as rubbing alcohol. Most houses have that. You have kids. They scrape their knees. You go with that, or you go with hydrogen peroxide. Both those types of products. You're going to have that until it's empty. Looking at the department's website today, they have a number of examples of the types of products that go in the HHW programs. All of these are correct. I'm not debating any of that. But you're missing, the things that are under your kitchen sink, the things that are in your laundry room, the things that are in your bathroom, your personal care products, your cosmetics, your over-the-counter drugs. All of those types of products go into the system And again, at the end of the day, they're all designed to be used to completion. The scope of an EPR program around household hazardous waste would involve hundreds of different product categories. It would involve hundreds of thousands of products across various brands. And we believe that building a program to try to manage leftover waste when the product is, again, designed to be used to completion is, both an ineffective model and is not the best use of resources when we're looking to figure out how do we get the funds into the local programs that need the funding. So, with that, I would like to thank you for your time. We believe there is an opportunity to work with the agency and all stakeholders on ensuring that the funding mechanism is not only functioning, but has sufficient resources so that the existing HHW programs, which again, we think are the best vehicle moving forward, but need adequate and sufficient funding to do their mission, so that consumers have benefits and the taxpayers aren't unreasonably burdened. We think that's the best way to proceed forward, and we're looking to work with all of you on what that solution would be then. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. So just to make sure that I understand what you're saying, you are offering to come to the table to find a way to financially support the existing programs as they are.
Correct.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on that? How would that be structured? So
we're working on a proposal where we are thinking of a fee-based system. Companies that sell products would have to, essentially at the beginning of the year, submit their funding for the products that they're selling to the states that then get dispersed to the programs that need them.
Okay, so we've been talking about this kind of this problem for a number of years now in the building, and I guess I'm curious who's the we and what's the timeline?
So for HCPA, it's our members. We have approximately 240 member companies, from the largest consumer brand manufacturers and marketers that you all recognize, to small mom and pop shops. We also are working with other allied trade associations in this space as well. Some of them have joint memberships. Some of them are unique that we don't represent. So we are, we're talking about a wide range of industry here that are looking to come to the table and fund your programs.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So help me understand this a little better. That fee, would that then be absorbed into the products that you sell to the distributors, and they would just increase their fee to the, is that correct? It works.
Yeah, I mean, that's how existing EPR systems work too.
This would be an additional to what you're already dealing with.
How each individual company figures out how to fund the mechanism, that's up to them.
I understand.
There are different ways to do that. So.
Right.
So I guess, again, I'm curious, who is it you're talking to? Have you been talking to A&R? Are you, and again, I would ask the timeline. When did you start talking? When will you be making a recommendation?
I don't know the specifics around the timeline. I believe conversations have taken place. Allison probably is our state representative or contract lobbyist for that are dealing with this. But I believe within what, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Alice.
Allison Crowley for the Household and Consumer Products Association. We've had some general discussions with A&R, nothing written down or anything in paper to share, but we've shared this general concept that we feel that industry is willing to come up and step up and fund some programming. We just feel that this existing EPR model for this particular product categories is a bit overkill. And so we're looking to somehow more streamline the funding directly to the solid waste districts and or the municipalities who need the funding for their existing programs. How we get there, we haven't really figured out yet, but we would welcome continued conversations with this committee, the Senate committee, A&R, and the solid waste districts.
So when did you start this conversation?
Just a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago. Basically when we came into secure testifying today.
Right. So, yeah, so I guess that's great. I'm open to this idea, but I also would just say, like, we have been talking about this for years now in the building. And the solid waste districts are at the end of their patience, I think, with absorbing these costs or even ability to absorb the costs. So I would love to get something more specific promptly. Do members have questions, further questions? Representative Clifford.
Chairman, would it be helpful if you were talking about certain products like that can be recycled once the goods are out of the bottle, so to speak?
Mhm.
Would it be helpful if there was a more defined list between?
Well, I would say, if we look at RCRA, the laws that regulate solid waste and hazardous waste, there are four main criteria. Is it corrosive? Is it flammable, toxic, reactive? From those, the known universe of what HHW can possibly be is relatively known. It's just it's large and vast because those things cover a broad range of products. That's the challenge that we're looking at here is how do you have a program that handles potential waste if the consumer doesn't use it up all the way. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we all go into our garages or sheds. The last time I moved, I had to get rid of a can of lubricant because I wasn't going to bring it with me. Working with aerosols, it's the can of spray paint that's been in your shed for 20 years and, it's still good, but, when are you ever going to use it? What do you do with that can then? It's not appropriate just to throw it out. That's why these programs exist. So, I think from our standpoint, how do we fund those existing programs for when the consumer has that leftover product? It's not some sort of model that looks at, well, here, we need to now grab onto everything because, in most cases, the appropriate vehicle is going to be into curbside recycling or the appropriate recycling stream, whether it's a drop off, curbside, what have you.
Well, I would note that actually we took testimony. There's tons and tons of this collected every year. So yes, ideally people might use up the products, but that's not what's happening. So there's actually a very large volume of household hazardous waste that need to be addressed.
Is there a breakdown of what that waste is? Specific product category?
There is, yes. Yep.
I mean, I'll just say from my perspective, I would appreciate knowing what types of products we're looking at then.
I'm sure that between the solid waste districts and the ANR, we know what types of products we're looking at. Representative Celia.
So, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, as you know, new to this discussion. So I'd like to better understand what it is that you're looking for with some specificity in terms of information. This is my first go around
No, I'm just saying.
on this issue. So I like to say for dummies, please.
No,
Knowledge, okay?
are we looking at, motor oil? Are we looking at like I mentioned, the spray paint can? Or are we looking at, more of the everyday consumer product that again is used up to completion? Are we looking at the glass cleaner? Are we looking at drain openers and things of that nature? Kind of what product categories are most being collected?
So you're looking to quantify. I thought you were looking to specify.
Well, whatever information is available would be appreciated, I would say.
So my understanding thus far of what I've been hearing is we would be looking at items that are, are these items not labeled corrosive or flammable? Or
No, under the FHSA, Federal Hazardous Substance Act, manufacturer required to label if it's, extremely flammable, or combustible, if it's corrosive, if it's toxic, you're going to see the danger, poison,
okay,
with skull and crossbones on it. So these labels are clearly identified.
Okay.
What types of products they are.
Okay. And so then help me understand, if they're clearly labeled, what are you worried about?
Well, I mean, from the standpoint of we'd like to have a better understanding of what products are actually being collected, though, instead of potentially applying it across all product categories that could become HHW. Do we need to have something that's more targeted then?
So if it was all corrosive, flammable, explosive, whatever the four categories, I shouldn't say whatever the four categories are, I'm not looking at them, but the four categories, if we were saying it's all, those categories, then you are asking for us to then do what?
Well, so we are supportive of all four categories of the main criteria. That's what we would be looking to fund. But from our standpoint, what is the breakdown of what's actually being collected, though?
As opposed to what?
Well, from that standpoint of if, again, I'll use motor oil as an example. If I think the bill was 640,000 tons. If 500,000 of it is motor oil, should we be focusing on motor oil then? I guess from a funding mechanism, target the products that are being collected and look at those more specifically rather than just blanket all of them.
So if I understand correctly, motor oil would probably be something that would be in the orphan category, is that right?
Well, it's flammable.
As a recycling program already, when you get your
Okay.
motor oil change, they dispose of it that way. I'm not sure why we're talking about motor oil.
Well, I'm just using an example because it's flammable and everybody deals with it. So
Okay, but that has its own recycle. So could you use a different example? So
I'll go back to the automotive windshield
Hold on
washer.
a second. I legitimately don't understand the problem that you need us to help you solve in order to fix this issue for the solid waste districts.
So I guess from my standpoint, what I'm interested in learning is, are we looking at more, say, a lubricant or a drain opener? What type of products are most commonly being collected?
So why would we not see that on the label? I'm sorry for being really dense here. So why would we not, if it's labeled, like,
I think
why do you need the information? Sorry,
No,
Madam
it's
Chair.
fine.
I
Yeah.
hate to belabor this, but I don't really understand.
I think he's just saying, what does it make? What is this house? If you have a household hazards collection, what?
Correct. We're talking.
Made up of what?
Yes, we're talking about 100,000 of products. Which product categories are the ones being most collected?
And so knowing that information will help you to do what?
Identify which product categories are those that need to be either be looked at from a production standpoint. Perhaps there's something we can do to modify them so that they are used to completion, or at the same point in time when we're looking at what type of fees should be assessed for different things. You're applying the fees to what's actually being collected then.
Got it.
So would you support, or the folks you represent support, if we had a fee on products being sold in the state that fit into the four categories that were,
Yes.
you would?
Yes.
Okay.
What's
that? Yeah. And have you thought about how that fee would work?
Well, you would have companies essentially register that they are selling products into the state. Whether it's the brand owner, whether it's somebody selling through e-commerce platforms or distribution. Essentially the responsible party for bringing the product into the states. In our eyes would be the responsible organization or responsible company to then pay that fee. And from there, based on the number of companies that are doing business in the state of Vermont, you then divvy up and figure out, okay, what does that fee look like then?
Great. And are you aware of other states that have a fee on household hazardous waste?
No, I'm not aware of any state that has a fee. This, to my knowledge, is the first of its nature.
Representative Baumgart.
You talked about using products to completion. I get your point. Are the containers then still considered hazardous?
No, the empty container is not considered hazardous under our laws. Under RCRA, for any consumer-based product, there is a threshold of 3% residue that, as long as you're under that, you're considered to be empty at that point.
Would I be right if I said that those containers can't be recycled, that they end up in the landfill?
I don't want to cast a broad spectrum, but in general, those containers can be recycled. There might be specific nuts and bolts that we need to discuss, but I use a glass container to completion. That container can then be recycled. You're talking about typically either a PET container or an HDPE container that can then be recycled.
Just also to follow up, you said that your folks could support a fee, and I think it would be by the product based on what would it be by volume, sales? How would that work?
I think that's something that we would be interested in talking with you all further and stakeholders. It could be something based on that. It could just be a flat fee for doing business in the state.
Okay, so the volume actually going out to me would be very variable, I would assume, because it's going to depend on what you found in your shed.
Correct. And we don't know how to account for that then, based on, I would presume changes each and every year. The consumer X is going to have different leftover products each and every year that need to be disposed of then.
Okay. Do members have further questions? We have everyone here, so we don't have anyone on Zoom. Okay.
If you got timeline, when is crossover?
Week after town meeting.
So the week after town meeting.
We got an email today, didn't we? 17th, Mark?
Yes, please, Representative Sibilia.
So if we were to charge a fee, can you just explain to me how that, so I'm still sort of there with you on the problem you were trying to solve. Can you explain how that resolves your problem?
Well, so if we paid a fee to go fund the existing programs, in my mind, that's the easiest direct way to go solve this problem. Then, it's the fact that solid waste industries, local programs, they need more funding, and so to me that fee would then go to pay for that. And understanding how much volume is being collected each year, I would think we would work with the agency then to come together and say, okay, how much do we as industry need to contribute each year to help adequately fund it then, and then divvy that based on the number of registrants.
That's the EPR program, right?
Well, but with the EPA program, the companies that manufacture the products are not the ones actually collecting the products. They're still going into the existing HHW programs. We're, through what we're looking at, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel in terms of what's already being done. The existing HHW programs would still be existing and utilizing that then.
Yeah, Representative Stebbins.
If there was a fee program, would with the companies that you represent, be willing to pay for the full gap that the solid waste facilities are experiencing, and that it would be acceptable to have it escalate because not very much reduces in cost.
And to your point, it probably will escalate. That's why we would propose to talk with the agency each year to figure out what that funding mechanism is. How much is needed each and every year then, so that yes, we then cover that portion.
Have you talked with any of the solid waste districts?
I don't know if you've had.
No.
Okay.
Allison Crowley again. We have not, Madam Chair, but we would very much welcome the opportunity.
Okay.
To do so.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.
All right, next up, we will welcome via Zoom Scott Castle from the Product Stewardship Institute.
Hello, everyone. Chair Sheldon, Vice Chair Sibilia, and members of the committee. My name is Scott Cassell, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Product Stewardship Institute, or PSI. And I'm here with my colleague, and she will now introduce herself. Suna.
Well, Chair Sheldon, Vice Chair Sibilia, and members of the committee. My name is Suna Bayrakal. I'm Director of Policy and Programs at PSI.
And I'm going to be speaking first, and then Suna will speak next, and then we'll be open for questions, of course. So I want to start by saying thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of H67. And our organization, PSI, is a national nonprofit that has worked for the past 22 years to reduce the health and environmental impacts from consumer products, about 25 different industrial sectors, including household hazardous waste. We've performed this work in conjunction with the Vermont DEC and nearly every solid waste district in the state. Now, we do this by conducting research and pilot projects to identify the problems and the solutions regarding each product sector. We also develop policies that will remove the financial and management burden from governments, taxpayers, and ratepayers, and share that responsibility with producers who put these products on the market. Now, ultimately, we are aiming to better protect public health and the environment, and to provide a financial incentive for producers to move toward providing more sustainable products when possible. We seek to develop policies jointly with all willing stakeholders. As a matter of fact, I went back to get my graduate degree years ago in environmental policy and dispute resolution for just that reason. Protecting the public from household hazardous waste is not a new problem, as many of you have already mentioned. We have known about the danger of disposing of HHW in the trash and down the household drain since at least 1983. And that's the year that I started my 40-year career in waste management by working first for the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. That was a statewide nonprofit in Philadelphia. And one of my jobs was to answer a citizen hotline, specifically on what to do with household hazardous waste. It was a term coined by my colleague and friend, Dave Galvin, who's a King County, Washington official. And Dave later became the president of our organization. Now, Dave was also the first president of the first national or North American Hazardous Materials Management Association. It's called NAMA. And they focused on household hazardous waste as well as small business waste. And I was NAMA's third president. Now, in 1995, just a couple of other things here about my experience. I developed one of the country's first manuals for government officials to answer citizen questions on what to do with HHW from the phone. And at this time, when I was the Director of Waste Policy and Planning for Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, I developed the first HHW master plan for the state. Now, I would not have spent so much of my career addressing waste issues such as HHW if governments all across the country did not think that this was a problem. So while all the strategies and policies that we've worked on, including those in Vermont, they provided guidance to the public and to other officials on how to prioritize toxic products for their limited dollars, it's really failed to reduce the potential harm caused by these products. So these are hazardous materials. As you were referencing before, if generated by a business, they would be regulated. So the only reason that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency did not regulate HHW is because there are tens of millions of households around the country, and they deem that too difficult to enforce. But they still, the EPA still recommends that all these products be collected, but they just don't provide the funding for any of that. Now, in 2000, bring us up to the current policies of EPR, extended producer responsibility. So I founded PSI based on that policy, and with Jen Holliday from Chittenden County and many others in Vermont and across the country. And this policy took hold across the US. So EPR laws, as you've heard before, they're holding producers responsible for covering the cost of safely managing hazardous household products after consumers don't need them. And covering those costs includes not only the current system, but it's new and improved systems that protect the public, because the current ones really don't do the job. They have limited dollars. We also need to fully educate the public about how important this is and what to do with those products. It also means that producers need to view their role differently. This is a major change over the past, let's say, 50 years on all products, all waste. No longer are producers just responsible for reducing facility emissions to air, water, and land, but they're now responsible for eliminating the full life cycle impacts from their products. Now, this means that they have a role in making sure that their products are safely managed. And usually with HHW, that means the collections that we've all been talking about, so they don't go down the drain and the toilet or into the garbage. This bill is going to change the policy, as I said, over the past 40 or 50 years, and it's consistent with basic EPR models that we have worked on with our government members and corporate and environmental partners, including Vermont's laws on EPR, on paint, electronics, mercury thermostats, mercury lamps, and batteries. It's all based on the same principle of EPR and many of the same items. So producers are taking responsibility, as was mentioned, for these and other HHW products. So it does make sense for them to take full responsibility for the HHW included in H67. Now, if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to address just 3 issues that have come up over the previous testimony. One is whether H67 will increase consumer costs. A second, whether every product and producer covered by the bill products and producers must be known before enacting the law, as was mentioned before, and whether all producers need to be covered by one PRO. So we work on the entire waste stream, 25 products in the United States and many states, and most recently on packaging EPR bills. There's been 4 laws passed, and there's some good instruction for us. So number one, whether all producers need to be covered by one PRO. Well, first, H67 allows for the formation of multiple stewardship organizations, and that provision is standard in most, if not all, EPR bills. For example, in packaging EPR bills, some producers, and this is the segment of Flexible Packaging Association, and you'll get to know all this when you deal more with the packaging EPR, pressurized gas cylinders as well, and some others, they're actually considering whether they want to form their own PRO under the laws that have already been passed. So the answer is there's an off-ramp for those kind of products and producers that don't want to be lumped in with one association. And they might do that because it will be more efficient for them, less costly, but they still need to adhere to the same goals, standards, and other aspects of the law. Okay, secondly, whether H67 will increase consumer costs. So this has been one of the biggest questions that's been asked in every state legislature around the country regarding the packaging EPR bills. And basically the answer comes down to this. There is no evidence that consumer prices have risen noticeably due to packaging EPR laws, which have been in place not here in the United States. We don't have that experience yet, but in Canada and Europe over the past 35 years. So I can go through this in detail and provide the studies, but there's one Canadian study, it's York University, that basically used the modeling approach that predicted consumer prices would rise, but they, the criticism of this study is that producers will pass 100% of their costs onto consumers in the province where the EPR is located and not spread out those costs nationally or regionally. Secondly, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality paid for a study done by RRS, a consulting firm, that compared actual product prices from store shelves in several Canadian provinces. And they found that in most cases, consumer prices for the same goods remained constant and were not dependent on whether a province had an EPR packaging law. And the last study is in 2022 by Columbia University, and they found even if EPR compliance costs were to lead to a doubling of packaging costs, the upper bound of that cost increase to consumers would be about 0.69% of grocery spending, or a maximum of $4 per household per month. So we would expect a similar outcome for HHW products. All right, just 2 other things here, if I may. Whether every product and producer covered by the bill must be known before enacting the law. So the 4 packaging EPR laws that have been enacted, they were enacted before every piece of packaging and every producer making that packaging was identified. That just like this bill, there's a general framework in the statute for what is covered, but really companies generally know whether they will be covered before a bill is enacted. And in those other laws, the packaging ones, it is considered a producer's responsibility to figure out if they need to comply. Now, the government, DEC, would help them, of course, but that's the PRO's responsibility. and they represent all the companies and help them get in compliance with the law. And the reason they do this is because they don't want any free riders to escape. They want everyone to pay their fair share. So in conclusion here, there are many good companies that provide useful household products that are designed with hazardous materials, but these products do cause potential harm to the environment and the public unless properly managed. And this bill is nothing more than providing the tools that Vermont state and local government officials need to protect their citizens and the environment. So I think Suna here has some additional comments, unless you want to ask some questions now.
Do members have questions for Mr. Cassell? Not seeing any right now. So let's go to the next witness, please.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of H67. I thought I would start with a little background about myself and some of the work at PSI and on HHW EPR. I have a master's degree in engineering and a PhD that was focused on the relationship between environmental policy and technology. I've also worked in consulting, in regulatory compliance auditing, technical and economic assessment in the areas of pollution prevention, hazardous and solid waste management, air quality and water pollution control. At PSI, I work on a range of products, including HHW, but also batteries, lamps, thermostats, so other toxic products, but also bulky products like carpet, mattress, and tires. My expertise includes an understanding of product stewardship and EPR in the US and Canada at both the operational and the policy level as well. Over the past decade at PSI, I have analyzed the operational feasibility of EPR for HHW programs in the US and also looked at best practices and lessons learned from existing such programs in Canada as well. We've conducted PSI research and helped to develop and support bills in Vermont and also Oregon. And we've looked at the potential for use of HHW EPR to manage HHW in Washington state as well. HHW EPR has been operating successfully in Canada since the 1990s. And in the past few years has actually expanded to two new provinces based on that success. So there's a total of 5 provinces in Canada that currently have EPR programs. Some, I think Saskatchewan is just implementing, and Alberta just passed their regulations in October, so they're not yet implemented. But just wanted to give also some results from the Canadian programs. British Columbia increased collection volumes 9% annually year over year from 2010 to 2016. Manitoba also increased collection volumes in their first 5 years by 419%. There was also a BC study that looked at the scenarios of EPR versus no EPR in their paint and HHW program. They're combined in their program. And that study concluded that only 1.1 pounds per capita would have been collected in a non-EPR scenario versus 1.5 pounds per capita that was collected with EPR. So just a few data points from the Canadian HHW EPR programs. Also want to mention that PSI has developed a best practice EPR policy model to manage HHW, and Bill H67 is consistent with this model and really contains key elements of an effective EPR law. These elements include performance goals to measure progress, annual reporting to provide transparency and monitor implementation, education and outreach to raise public awareness about safely managing HHW, and also reducing leftover products as well. So the source reduction is addressed. And the law also includes requirements for education targeted at overburdened and vulnerable communities, addressing some equity issues as well. Compensation to local governments for collection costs, and provision for stewardship plan renewal to improve the program based on lessons learned as the program matures every 5 years. And as a result of the effectiveness of Vermont's existing EPR laws, I know Scott had mentioned earlier, the paint, electronics, pharmaceuticals, mercury lamps, mercury thermostats, and batteries. Vermont has the highest per capita collection and recycling rates in the nation for several of these products, and we would expect similar good results from H67. Again, just to reiterate, Scott had highlighted that producers are taking responsibility for these household hazardous waste items, things like paint, lamps, mercury lamps, and thermostats, but not yet for those HHW products that fall under H67. Lastly, I'd just like to address 3 issues that I believe came up during the hearing. Scott had already touched on one, whether every product and producer covered by the bill must be known before enacting. And I just wanted to add to that to indicate that the bill uses existing regulatory standards to define covered products. And these are industry standards that the industry is already familiar with. And a similar approach using regulatory and technical standards has worked successfully in Canada in multiple provinces. That said, I will tell you that PSI did a study of HHW EPR that it conducted in Vermont to help identify producers and products that fell under the bill that was introduced in 2018. And from a sample taken at Vermont's largest HHW facility, roughly 1,800 products were identified, with 60% of the products from the top 20 producers. So more than half were from 20 producers alone. And approximately 650 manufacturers were estimated to be covered by that bill in 2018. Again, a bill similar to H67. The second issue I wanted to address was whether it would be too challenging to bring so many producers together, which again, from a PSI study that we conducted in Oregon, we found existing stewardship organizations in Canada and in the US that have successfully operated with hundreds and even thousands of producers. Some examples are Product Care, which is the HHW stewardship organization that operates most of the programs in Canada, works with about 200 producers. The Electronics Product Recycling Association in Canada has more than 7,000 producers. In the US, Calter Cycle works with over 250 producers, and Paint Care works with hundreds of producers as well. The last issue that can sometimes be raised is that this is a complicated endeavor and never done before in the United States. I would respond that US companies already participate in these programs in Canada and have done so for several years. In the Vermont study, names of several of the manufacturers that PSI identified as producers appear on Product Care's list of producers that are familiar with and implementing these programs in Canada. And that concludes my testimony. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I guess I would ask either you or Scott if what your thoughts are on the fee proposal that was just brought before us.
So one of the things I did in the Vermont study was look at alternative program models, and we evaluated, there's a fee model for tires that's across the US where consumers pay a fee in advance, and that is supposed to help increase recycling and reduce illegally dumped tires. Also state grants and funds. These programs typically don't have performance goals to evaluate and drive program effectiveness. They don't always come with education and outreach requirements to increase consumer awareness. The funding is typically not sustainable, and as well, there's often not annual reporting as there is in EPR to monitor the program over time. I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add.
So Suna was was mentioning consumer fees, like where, tires or, used oil or something like that. So those are consumer fees. Frankly, I wasn't clear as to what kind of fee the gentleman before from the industry was referencing. There are things called fees that each producer will pay into the producer responsibility organization, that allows that PRO to act on behalf of all the producers. So it's an efficient way of complying with the law for hundreds or more of these companies. So that is typical. If it's a producer internalized fee, more along the lines of thermostats, for example, in Vermont, but not like paint. Paint's a consumer fee. So I wasn't clear. I don't think that you're considering a consumer fee there. But if there is a fee on packaging, that's how it works. There's fees. They're called eco-modulated fees based upon the cost of managing each packaging type and into the system, the recycling system. So here, I don't think that it's set up that way in the law, but there's no reason it couldn't be, where a producer of a highly toxic material is paying more into that system than one with a less toxic material. But here it could also be just paying into the fund based upon the total cost of the system and reimbursing the municipal programs. And all of that is done in the very beginning by the PRO. It's called a needs assessment, more technically in packaging laws, but that's what Paint Care did, for them to figure out the price per gallon of paint that a consumer has to pay. When they buy the paint for it to cover the whole program, they basically figure out the whole system and how much each producer needs to pay, and how much it's going to cost for to set up the system, and including education and including oversight and enforcement from the DEC.
So I guess what I'm kind of hearing you say is that the EPR proposal on the table requires a fee, and we get sort of more, potentially kind of more order from it. And we have tracking, and we have education, and we have sustainable funding that a regular flat fee might not provide.
There isn't a fee. There isn't a fee in the bill. I think Scott's talking about the fee the producers pay to the stewardship organization. So it's a cost internalization model. So there isn't a fee for the consumer to pay in.
Right. I think we're talking about a producer fee either way, is I guess what I was trying to say. Like, I don't think we're talking about a consumer fee.
No.
In either scenario. Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Scott, I think what you just said was that H67 as designed, the PRO could choose to do sort of, although this question now just confuses me, like a fee type structure that we heard from our first witness today, and that it could be, designed such that if 60% of the materials are coming from 20 of the companies, it could be designed in that way based off of what the businesses chose to do.
Yes, that's the way it's done in the business for years. Let me give you another example. Recharge, so the battery law that you have, and yours is on the primary single-use batteries. So there's a PRO, call to recycle, and call to recycle figures out how much they need to charge each of the producers based on the types of products that they put onto the market. And they have their own formula. Government really doesn't need to get involved in that. The only time government gets involved in the formula for these type of fees is if they want to encourage some sustainability. So that's what's happening on packaging, in order to, let's say, move away from plastics or have recyclable plastics or recycled content in them. those laws do have something in statute that gives some general guidance. But many of the other laws leave it up to the PRO to figure that out amongst themselves, like this one.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
would, I was just going to add that my understanding of HCPA's discussion of a fee program might be similar to what Vermont's current pesticide registration, product registration program, where they would pay a per product fee. And so I just wanted to mention that, again, like unlike a model EPR program, that program lacks performance measures, although there is education related to that. So,
yeah, I think the bottom line is I think it was they're still perhaps trying to figure out what type of fee system they might want, but I think it's fair to say that the Vermont local governments that worked on this bill and others, they've thought about all these types of funding systems, and this one is the best one that they think is appropriate for household hazardous waste.
Members have further questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate
Actually,
it.
I'm just curious, where is the Product Stewardship Institute located?
We are located in Boston, and I've been to the Montpelier State House many times. Hope to be there again someday.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for joining us via Zoom today.
Thank you.
thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Right. And next up, we have Kelly Gleason. Hello. Welcome, Ms. Gleason.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for my first opportunity. This is my first time testifying, so I'm happy to be here. For the record, my name is Kelly Gleason. I'm an environmental analyst with Casella Waste Systems. I've been with Casella, this is my 4th year with the company. Prior to that, I actually worked for local government for a county health department. So this is an interesting topic for me. I sort of have seen this from both sides. Just a couple quick tidbits about Casella as a whole. We're headquartered in Rutland, but we are a regional solid waste management company. We operate in several states, and annually we manage 800,000 tons of recycling, 400,000 tons of organics. In Vermont specifically, we have managed over 20,000 tons of food waste, 50 tons of yard trimmings, 11,000 cubic yards of compost, and relevant to today, coordinated in collecting 26 tons of household hazardous waste. So these would be the 2021 statistics.
So can you say the household hazardous waste number?
Yes, we've coordinated with towns and worked to collect 26 tons. So what that means, and probably my favorite part of our business that I don't know that a lot of people know about, is that we will contract with the independent towns or alliances. So if they're not in a district and they remain independent and the requirements of their solid waste implementation plans are a little much for them to manage, we can contract with those towns and help them manage those requirements. So currently we work with Mountain Alliance. The representative from Randolph is here. That Mountain Alliance includes Roxbury, Northfield, Brookfield, Braintree, Randolph. We also work with the city of Newport, the town of Lowell, the town of Coventry, the town of St. Johnsbury, and the town of Fairfax. And so I get to be here sort of looking at it from the town perspective as well as industry perspective. Really, I know that you've heard a lot of testimony from towns, and the overarching thing that you've heard is that these are extremely expensive and they are getting more expensive, and what we're seeing is no different. We do have the benefit of having a corporate contract with our household hazardous waste vendor, and we're able to pass through those costs to the towns that we work with. Even with that, they're still getting more expensive every single year for all of the towns. And what I just want to leave you with today really is that we as a company support any legislation to keep household hazardous waste out of the landfill. We do not want to be responsible for it at its end of life. We want to protect the environment, public health, and our employees. And so any mechanism of doing that, whether it is this EPR legislation or any other mechanism to reduce those costs to the towns and keep this material out of the landfill, we are in support of. Some of the other things that I've just seen in the last couple of years are the events in the way that they're managed. They're just increasingly harder to do in general. Traffic control has been a concern. One of the other districts had a vendor cancel their event, I believe, just like a month before it was scheduled, and they couldn't get another vendor to host their event, but they're required by law to have 2 a year. And so we ended up having to help them out and receive a variance from A&R so that they could go over the 20 road miles and have them come to one of our events. So any legislation that would sort of make this less taxing on the towns so that they could then utilize those resources toward education, other areas to make these events easier and more accessible, we support. And that's really it. I don't want to, I know you've heard a ton of testimony on it, but we really just wanted to come in and say thank you for your efforts in this area, and that we really do support keeping this out of the waste stream. Thank you. I'm happy.
Smith.
I'd like to ask you a question. I met her at Casella yesterday. I want to ask you the same question so that you hear. You don't take any, I guess you can respond, but you don't take at Casella any household hazardous waste from out of state, do you?
We don't take any household hazardous waste at all at the landfill. So when I say that we coordinate to take, last year it was 26 tons of household hazardous waste, we will work with towns to host events, but we use a third-party contractor who manages that. And then like all, the one we use is different than, I believe I heard some use US Ecology or others. That's all shipped out of state. There's nowhere in the state of Vermont that can be disposed of.
That's what I wanted to hear you say.
Yes. Yep. And that's, part of the cost is I just received some manifests the other day for reporting, and it's going to Texas. It's going far, and with the cost of everything, labor, transport, these towns need a break.
Representative Smith has another
I would
question.
like to add something. I know you mentioned yesterday that I think everybody in this committee should at some point in the spring do a tour at Casella. So I'm planning to,
Absolutely.
and when the East Side Restaurant hosts it, it's probably the best time.
Yes, we do have.
You can go to a great barbecue at the dump.
I mean, who doesn't love free food? Yes, even at the landfill. So yes, we do host an open house. We do that at all of our landfills. But even outside of the open house, we're happy to have anyone come up and do a tour. You can contact myself or anyone else.
Representative Pat.
Since you brought that up, if we do that, I recommend that we also take a tour of the landfill methane plant that's there that I gave tours of probably about 30 times. And at some point, I will link you to the 10-minute really well done video of one of those tours starring me. But given that our consideration of energy issues as well, if we're going to the landfill, we might as well ask for a tour of that plant as well.
Yep, we include that because you go right past it when you're up there anyway. But yeah, it's a wonderful facility to see. Loud, but wonderful.
Yeah, Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you were going to say something,
I will, but you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming in today. So I'm on, I think it's Mountain Alliance. Yes, it is Mountain Alliance website, and I'm looking at the materials that are accepted at the HHWs. What other products are you seeing, or do you envision that are being cast away in the landfill that you would also like to see added to this list? Or is it just a consumer irresponsible?
That's tough to answer. So the list of acceptable items isn't set by us sort of as the contractor for the Mountain Alliance. It's set by our contractor, right? And so it could change if they don't have the capability to manage a product at a certain time. But really, I think it's a pretty comprehensive list. All of the items listed there and in the bill, we'd like to see kept out of the landfill. I will say, we do see a lot of paints and resins, and I know Josh Kelly spoke to that there is a paint care program that is a large portion of what comes into those events. And a lot of the, we had this when my grandfather passed away and we cleaned out his garage, unknown items that have been there that you just don't know what they are. But our contractor can still manage that, because otherwise someone's going to just throw that in their garbage, and we don't want that.
So you mentioned paint, and I know oil-based paints are on the list.
Yes.
Is the latex paints that you're seeing?
Both. Yeah, they both come in to the events.
Yeah, Representative Pat.
You had said earlier in response to the question that you don't take any hazardous waste. I assume that means you don't knowingly take any, but if someone puts some in their 15-gallon kitchen trash bag, do you have any sense of how much of that happens?
We don't know. Unfortunately, when people know they're not supposed to throw it away and they really hide it, it's just as hidden from us. If it's something, if we see it, our at least curbside transfer stations, they're really good at, if it is on the floor, they'll pull it out. But what's hidden in there, we just can't quantify.
I'm curious, you mentioned just getting a report for where the products are going. Do you remember any more of those? You said one of it went to Texas, and then what is happening to them?
So, well, that depends on the vendor, and I can provide you further information on that. So what happens when we have a host a collection event, say, is it's collected, the vendor has a manifest, a household hazardous waste manifest, everything has to be tracked on that. They log it in when they take it, and that also travels with it and to its end destination. So the vendor we use has either a household hazardous waste landfill or incineration, wherever it's going as their end goal. And then we get those manifests back to say, yes, it made it to its destination, and it's accounted for. And so, I believe Josh Kelly spoke to this. So all of the solid waste management entities have to do a household hazardous waste report annually. And we use those manifests to file those reports. So they tell us the pounds of what was collected, in reference to the earlier question, broken down into what type of product it is, whether it's a pesticide, a flammable liquid, and an acid, a base, and it has the end destination there. So I'm happy to pull together some of those, at least for the last couple of years, if that's valuable to you, and send that over.
Yeah, that would be helpful to understand. But so you said some of it is paint, but the paint's covered. So
paint's covered under paint care, so that gets separated out. So our vendor will then charge back to the paint care program.
And then any other products covered under an existing EPR, same thing.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Great.
Yeah, and then I did include. We also do outreach on this, education and outreach, and I included a couple different of our outreach posters, one for the landfill banned items, one for the household hazardous waste events. These ones were all for the Mountain Alliance from last year, and the other on EPR, just sort of explaining what it is. And that's what we provide to the businesses for the required business outreach. Just if there's any further information useful in those for you.
Great. That's right. That's all up on our webpage, everyone. Further questions? Yeah, Representative Torrey.
Thank you for your testimony. I was just curious with the 26 tons, how is that? Is it changing? Is there a trend line?
So in 2020, I saw, at least for the towns that I manage, a massive increase. People were home, they were cleaning things out, and while you would think, in some instances, we only had one event because the first one was scheduled, say, in March or April, and no one was comfortable with that yet. But then the ones that were later in fall, mass amounts coming in. It did level off a little bit after that. And for the most part, all of the towns that we work with, they stay pretty consistent, whether it be, 5 tons or 3 tons year over year, pretty consistently.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Or Ms. Gleason? Thank you very much for your
Thank you
testimony.
for having me.
Right, members, I would like to just draw your attention to the Friday agenda, which is when we'll be taking this topic up again. Apologies for the gap, but it's what worked for folks who wanted to testify. And I want you to start thinking about your outstanding questions on the bill and who else you might need to hear from. And I would love it if you have those now, share them or send them to me and Kate. And folks have comments on the witnesses we've heard from so far. Feel free to discuss that now. Representative Sibilia.
Yes. So Madam Chair, if we, so we'll be doing a walkthrough and any kind of edits on Friday.
Could do that. Yes.
Okay. So I'm thinking about the testimony that we've heard from industry and hearing that we're approaching a place here. So I guess it would be helpful if industry has any specific language to have that soon, really soon.
Yeah,
Actually,
would be very helpful.
I would like to have that so I could understand.
Yeah.
So
Representative Stebbins and then Tori.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Because I didn't entirely understand the first witness from today because I was taking notes and I heard things that were like EPR can work, but not in this case. Industry, like I'm just kind of still confused by that, and then by some of the follow-up testimony. So I guess I'll just flag that.
We do have, the witness is still in the room if he wants to rejoin us and answer. Do you have questions?
I guess I'm
You have follow-up questions.
go for it. Rep.
All
Baumgart's,
right,
and
Mr.
I'll
Georges,
try.
would you be willing to to join us again?
Of course.
Great.
I guess I really have one question. I'm sitting here listening to all the testimony today before, and you talked about what you're proposing as being more simple than, and yet when I'm listening to this, I'm thinking either way, you have to figure out in some ways a fairly complicated system of which of all the products you represent pay which amount to make this happen. And that happens either way, whether it's in the PRO or whether it's separately. So how is it? I'm thinking it's not really any less complicated to do it the way 867 is proposed than what you're talking about. But tell me, you obviously think it is, so explain.
So we're not sure how to create a pro for the wide range of products that are involved. And I know Scott and his colleague talked about, creating multiple pros for multiple product streams. But, the reality is, companies in this space, they want to pay the fee into one organization, whatever check they're going to cut, do one, have it go where it needs to go there. And that's where the complexities then lie, where we're envisioning, how in the world do we set something up for, things that, again, I'll say we can't just look at total product sales into the state because products are designed to be used completely. We don't know how much is going to come up. We don't know what kind of breakdown is going to be. I would be interested in to learn how much paint is being collected in that tonnage, just to say, okay, it's being collected, great. We want it to be collected. But put that to the side, what of the other things that aren't being covered right now under other programs, how much, kind of what does that look like then? And so, in terms of trying to determine how to create such a program, I guess from our standpoint, there's a lot of unknowns in how we would actually go create that then. And that's why to us, from our standpoint, how do we fund the programs that are existing so that they have, sufficient resources to do what they're already doing? That to us seems like the easiest way to get this, instead of creating a middleman of sorts to have this organization, how do we get the funds directly to these local organizations? Then that's what we're interested in exploring here.
And maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me it's almost a distinction without a difference. Because either way, you have to figure out which products that are sold in which volumes have to pay how much. And either you figure it out, or somehow that would be the way it would work with the PRO, or somehow the agency's involved. And
well, and I guess
either way, you pay the same amount, and it goes to fund the program.
Well, I mean, I guess we're looking at it as if we're creating an organization responsible for doing that, that's additional fees that are going to be required to then fund that organization to operate and be able to do those things then. Well, I guess again, we're looking for whatever the best solution is for the state. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we want. The best solution for the state that gets, the funds directly where it needs to go as fast as possible.
Representative Tory.
Thank you. At the event over at the Capitol Plaza last week, I met an MMR lobbyist whose name I don't recall, and he shared a similar thought about just a direct payment to the solid waste districts. It's just a way to, support them and, streamline it a little bit. But I don't know if that's somebody you might want to reach out to for.
And just to chime in on that, I think, when we look at paint care, they're responsible for collecting the paint themselves and things of that nature. To us, the system to collect all these things already exists. So how do we fund that then? And I guess, in terms of what we're looking at is again, since the infrastructure already is there on collection, how do we then fund it? Not create a new organization that then goes and collects these things and reinvent the wheel sort of thing.
Representative Stebbins.
The more I listen, the more I get confused. I guess I heard something else earlier. I heard something else from the two product stewardship institute people, which was that it's one PRO that can bring in many companies. So it's not that you have to have a more complex system, but the concept is to have a less complex system that the industry gets to develop based off of what they come up with in terms of which products are being most seen in the waste stream, what that price should be.
So from our standpoint, when you say go create this, we're not waste experts of any kind. We're not experts in creating such a program. And we look at the several hundred different product categories that fall under and can be considered HHW, as to say how do we reinvent this wheel and tackle this in a manner that's efficient then. And that's where we go back to and say, since there's already existing programs to collect all that stuff, how do we, what is the best mechanism to go fund that then? And we're open to what that suggestion is. I don't want to come in and say I have all the answers here today to say how do we best do that. But from our standpoint, since that infrastructure already exists in terms of collection, again, it goes back to how do we fund that then?
I would just reiterate Vice Chair Sebelia's strong suggestion that some specific language.
We will get you something very quickly on that so that it's easier to chew on instead of just me babbling on here.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Representative Sakowicz.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little confused because it seems to me like industry would actually want to be a part of an organization which they're in charge of to manage this waste, because the current system costs a certain amount of money, right, to run. And you're saying that the industry is happy to pay for that. It's using some mechanism of divvying it up that we don't know yet, but which sounds complicated. But then it's basically, we would be giving the industry basically, a charge, every year that they can't control, that they have no control over what those costs, let me finish, that they don't have control over what those costs are. Whereas if you have a producer responsibility organization, which manages this, which is run by the industry, that there's a real incentive there for you to control your own costs and to figure out the best ways to manage these materials rather than saying to somebody else, well, you just take care of it and tell us what it costs and we'll give you whatever you need.
So, I look at that in the same vein that I look at, coming from the industry standpoint and having to manage our own hazardous waste that we would develop. And that is regulated. Businesses have to figure out how to deal with that then and manage that. The way that every company I worked for and the way that I believe almost every one of my members, if not every one of them, operates is, they go and they pay somebody to go handle it for them. We're not waste experts. I don't know how to control the costs around waste when that's not our expertise. And that's the part where, I certainly understand the thought process of wouldn't you want to be in control? I mean, typically speaking, yeah, who doesn't want to be in charge of your own destiny? But it's also a case where, we know what we don't know and we don't know, the handling and disposal of waste. So we would be, under the same scenario of having to contract somebody else to go and manage that for us then.
I guess my understanding is that the producer responsibility organization would be that organization that would be responsible for figuring out how to do it in the most efficient way. And since it's controlled by the producers, that they would have incentive to do so.
So my understanding of the other programs is they'll collect it, but they still use outside sources to actually dispose of these things.
Yeah. And these vendors seem to exist already, so you would be hiring them to do that.
Correct. So I go back and no matter who's, I guess, doing the contracting, you're still exposed to whatever they're going to charge for it because you need to do something with that waste.
Yeah, but it just seems like you would still want that control. Like maybe there's various contractors that do this and they're competing for your business. Whereas if, you're just going to the existing organizations that do it, they don't seem to have the same motivation if they're basically saying, well, we're just going to pass the costs on to the producers who told us they're going to pay for it no matter what it costs.
I kind of feel like we'd be in that same boat though too, and that's on top of having to go create this organization then that we don't necessarily know how to go create here for the wide range of products we're talking about.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So am I correct when I say, okay, you're just going to say, okay, let us know what it is we got to pay for, but we want a list of what it is we want to pay for. Is that correct?
Yeah, for when I don't mean to beat this horse down, but when the previous lady said, we collect significant amount of paint. I don't know what significant is, so I don't want to put any words in her mouth here. But she said 26 tons. Let's say 5 tons, for example, 10 tons, whatever that number is. We wouldn't want to go pay for the paint then. We already have a program that is in charge of doing that then.
Right, which what gets back to my point. You represent certain manufacturers and they want to know, okay, look, if we're going to pay for it, is our product included in that list, right?
To an extent, but at the same, I'll also say that, we represent paint companies as well because they produce other things than just paint. So they would need to be a part of each of these organizations then. So, at the end of the day, I think we're looking for the simplest solution to ensure that the funding goes where it needs to go. And we hear the terms go create a pro for hundreds upon hundreds of products, or product categories that are going to span thousands of product categories, or thousands of brand products. That just seems like a daunting task to us to, when there's already an infrastructure in place to collect those things without having to worry about that.
I think we can ask logistics questions questions to witnesses on Friday as well. So hold on to them, but go ahead. Representative Stebbins, if you have a question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So we heard testimony, two things that I'm just curious if, like, we're hearing completely opposing testimony, or if I'm missing some subtleties. One of the statements was that this bill uses existing industry standards to define what is covered and that businesses know how to read that. And then the other statement we heard was that with the EPR structure, it is the producer's responsibility to figure out if they must comply based off of those industry standards, because the producers wants everyone to pay their fair share. They don't want free riders. So do you feel like industry doesn't know how to determine those standards? And do you feel like that second statement is inaccurate?
Each individual company is going to understand how their products line up with the criteria: corrosive, reactive, flammable, or ignitable under the terms of the law.
Okay.
And toxic. Thank you. And so when I say each company is going to understand that, but we as an entire industry don't know what that entire pie looks like. That is something that we would have to go gather and figure out then from that standpoint in terms of instead of. Sorry about that. I'm like, so instead of being able to just again, I'll say streamline this. There's going to be a lot of legwork that we have to go do and understand where all that is coming from. And I forgot the second part of your question now. I'm sorry.
It was basically the concept that it's actually in industry's interest to identify this, because then they can make sure they're not having free riders who aren't, paying their fair share. So
the unfortunate thing with that is I'll just speak from a practical standpoint. I don't know how to get free riders out of the system altogether. Whether it's consumer buying, things through e-commerce platforms or other distribution means that aren't part of our overall network. I'll say, the manufacturers and marketers that are part of organizations like mine, whether it's mine or others that will inevitably be needing to be part of this process. Those are companies that understand their obligations, that want to do the right thing. But unfortunately, whether it's a small company in the southwest part of the United States that doesn't know of the changes in Vermont, or whether it's a foreign agent that is importing products into this country and unfortunately doesn't comply with all of our laws and regulations, those free riders end up happening. That happens on the pesticide program, and there are mechanisms put in place to where, if the agency finds out, hey, company X is selling product in the state and not registered, there's enforcement mechanisms, built, that they have to utilize to either, charge a fee, charge a fine, or get the product out of the state.
Can I just one more? I'm just really trying to get this. Under the PRO model, you're kind of responsible for thinking it through, putting it together, who's in, who's out, and doing it the way that you're talking about it. I just want to, I'm saying this so you can respond to it, whether I'm right or not. It's more of, and I don't say this negatively, so because I'm really, whatever works, but you're kind of, would I be right in saying that just your model would shift the burden to the agency to figure out who's in, who's out, and having to make the case for, is there a, because the PRO model, I think it's clearly on the producers to figure it out. And the way that you're talking about it would appear to me to shift kind of the burden to the agency and say, almost you could say, you prove that these products have to be in, or.
So I disagree a little bit in that for a couple of reasons. One, the agency does have responsibilities. Even if we create a PRO, they still have requirements for oversight and working with that PRO. So I don't want to cast as though it's all on industry in that case. In what we're looking to do companies still have the obligation to comply with the requirements of Vermont. So it's not as though that the agency has to go out and go and says, well, company X, we found that you're selling product in here, and go off the store shelves and be like, checking every single product. Is this company listed? Is this company listed? That's not what we're envisioning here. But we are, envisioning a scenario where the agency is working with us and other stakeholders to go and say, what is that funding pitfall here, and how, where does the funding need to go then?
All right. Thank you for rejoining us.
Oh, thank you for your time.
All right, so members, I think like in terms of how it would work, we'll have witnesses Friday that we can ask how the difference is. And certainly our own legislative counsel can help us understand like pesticides have a fee and how that program works versus how this EPR would work.
You said previously, if we have questions, do you want them to send them to you or do we want to?
Well, we're taking up again Friday afternoon. There are a number of witnesses are coming in. So they may be able to answer your questions. And then if you have ideas for other witnesses, send those to me. And to be continued. I'm not seeing any further comments. So we will take a break. We are coming back at 3:15 today. So we'll reconvene at 3:15.